What's up, and welcome to the Shonee Jackson Show. I believe this is episode 7. Regardless of what it is, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. If you do watch this, please like and subscribe to the channel. Subscribing will allow me to do this for the rest of my life and eventually maybe full time, right? And like the videos if you do like it. And also refer it to a friend. If you watch my show, if you like my content, what I talk about, and the way I talk about it, make sure you send it to people that you also are like-minded with and would like it as well. That being said, the time is finally here. Training camp starts today for the greatest franchise in all of sports, the Dallas Cowboys. And as I've said on this program many times before, the purpose of the Shonee Jackson Show and what we're doing, more so than anything in the world, is to get Lombardi number 6. And the journey to Lombardi number 6 starts today, fellas. Starts today. The long, grueling football offseason, the longest offseason in all of sports. Football is king in America. We wait all year long, and although the NFL has done a great job of monetizing everything and making this a 12-month a year product, 365 around the clock, you have NFL content, football content to indulge in, whether it be from the season's end and you got the combine and the build up to the draft with the thousands of mock drafts that are put out there and the draft hype that happens around that, the excellent job that they do with the draft, yada yada yada, the offseason free agency, you know how it goes. There's constant content, but it's still a long, grueling offseason without actual football being played. That ends today. Journey to number 6 starts today. We're going to dive into training camp stories, potential breakouts, players that we need to break out, players at certain position groups that we need to stand out. Hopefully, we get lucky in a few spots and have some breakout players where we need it. And then also just other things like the Dak Prescott contract situation, CeeDee Lamb obviously holding out a training camp. That's the story going into day one. We totally expected that to happen. That's not a surprise to anybody. We're not going to act shocked about it. We're not going to act naive to it. But we're going to talk about it, talk about the rumors of him getting signed pretty soon. I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. And, just Dallas Cowboys stuff. And then also, Skip Bayless got fired from Fox Sports 1. Gonna talk about Skip Bayless's career start to finish because I think it is finished. No disrespect, but I think that era of sports television, sports media is all but dead. We're gonna dive into that, how it started, how it ended, why it ended the way it did, and why we're where we are today. Thank God, right? So let's get right into it. The Dallas Cowboys start training camp today. Cannot wait. We'll start the conversation with the quarterback and CeeDee Lamb, of course. But let's start at the top with Dak Prescott. We go in to training camp. I feel like the Dak Prescott rumors have been all over the place. Every given day you go from there's been zero traction with Todd France, his agent, the team, and Dak on contract negotiations and where they're going. And the next day you wake up, you hear that it's potentially he's going to sign the biggest contract of all time, be the first player in NFL history to make over $60 million a year. Today or yesterday, I believe it was reported from Diana Rossini that he is set to be the first quarterback to ever go over $60 million a year. So obviously people that are tapped in to the contract space, to the agents of the world, I'm sure she has a relationship with Todd France or someone within the Dak camp because she's never reported on the Cowboys specifically. She works for The Athletic, very well-known reporter in Diana Rossini, and others like Rappaport have reported this throughout the summer, been hot and cold on that type of thing. The vibe I'm getting, as of 2 days ago, I would have told you that I don't think Dak Prescott at this point in time will be a Dallas Cowboy next year. The reason I felt that way is because the Dallas Cowboys and Dak, it all ultimately feels like a long-term engagement without a wedding date, right? Let's hypothetically say that original contract extension with Dak Prescott 4 years ago, going into that 2020 season, was the engagement or the proposal. They got engaged the day he signed that deal in 2020. We're 4 years down the road, we don't have a wedding date. We always know what that means, right? There's cold feet. Likely, you're not going to get married. That's the way that it's felt to me this entire time. And oftentimes, when you are in a relationship like that, not to be too Colin Cowherd here, but this is going to be a Colin Cowherd moment. When you're in a relationship that needs to end, or rather cannot take that final step of commitment to start a family with somebody, it's because somebody in that relationship, or both, one usually being stronger than the other, is non-committal for a reason. You don't love that person you know you're not good for that person for the rest of your life, if you will. And yet, what is so hard to break up, I think, on both sides is you don't want to see that person go on and be with somebody else and have to see what that's like. You also, for sure, in the Cowboys standpoint, don't want to see that person upgrade. Well, actually, you could say that goes both ways. I think Dak Prescott long term wants to be a Dallas Cowboy for dozens of reasons, right? Like the branding of the Dallas Cowboys. He grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan. I think any player naturally has the affinity to start with the franchise and end with the franchise. That's a romanticized thing amongst all athletes. If you think about the all-time greats that we grew up admiring and thinking about with Michael Jordan, Joe Montana, even Brady, Peyton Manning, all of these guys, even if they played for another team to end their career, the bulk of their legacy started and ended with one specific team, right? And you associate them with those teams that they're connected with. So naturally, I think that exists. And then, like I said, the branding of the Dallas Cowboys, the amount of money you make, you're treated like the president of the United States if you're the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, right? Dak Prescott's not an idiot. He loves that. He embraces that. He wants to be a Cowboy forever. He's been vocal about that his entire career. Now, do I think he's as married to doing that as he once was? No. And I think there's some sour grapes, not to the point to where it's toxic in any way. The Cowboys, in a sense, are toxic, and all of this offseason drama, I'm hoping comes to an end with actual football play starting today. We'll have highlights, breakout players, other things to talk about. You know, we create toxicity naturally, and anybody with this amount of attention, that's just naturally going to happen. But so I think that somewhat exists with him, and for sure his representatives, his team, his brother's been very vocal over the years how he's fine with the moving on for whatever that's fucking worth to anybody. But I think ultimately he wouldn't want to see the Cowboys turn around immediately and continue to have playoff success, continue to win division titles, and maybe go beyond the point that he wanted to. Just as much as the Cowboys don't want to see him move on, go to another team and maybe win a Super Bowl or do more or at least the same as he's done in Dallas, right? No matter what, even if you love someone so much and you can verbally say that I want them to go on and be happy and we're going to break up and I want the best for them, you never want them to do better than you. You want to upgrade more than they upgrade. And that is what I felt like all offseason long and really over the course of the last few years, the non-commitment to extending him early like people want to do and maybe getting a better deal or getting him cheaper than you will at this point, that's the reason it hasn't happened. And I talked about it on my last show. I'll talk about it again because only like 36 people watched it. Go watch my last program. It was probably the best episode I have out. But I talked about Dak Prescott's career against playoff qualifying teams. We talked about the 2-5 record in the playoffs. It goes beyond that, and that is something that needs to be addressed. Just like it needs to be addressed how well he's done in so many ways, and how much Dak has consistently improved year in year out. And I want to acknowledge that. Like last season was the best year of his career. He just turned 30 years old. It's not unrealistic to think that he's entering his prime as a quarterback in a position that is so much involved around being cerebral and processing, right? Because if we're being honest, and I'll talk about it a little later, Trey Lance, from a talent perspective, is already more talented than Dak Prescott ever has been and ever will be. He's got a God gift of an arm, a unique generational arm with really plus athleticism as a runner and just overall athlete, right? What Trey Lance's issue and his failure in San Francisco had to do with was processing. Really, really bad at processing. And if you're really bad at processing, you're not going to be good at quarterback. And so, unless he has made that development, and I hope he has, as a processor, and from if you listen to Mike McCarthy talk or any of the coaches in the building talk, you would think that he has, right? But that's hearsay. We don't know until we see it in training camp, live action, and in live games. But that said, Dak Prescott has improved in that area of his game every single year, which is why he was the MVP runner-up a year ago and got his first All-Pro. So I'm going to come at this with the most balanced perspective that I can have because I want to make it very, very clear that as of today, when this season starts, I'm fully behind Dak Prescott. That's our quarterback. I want Lombardi number 6, and I want it fucking this year. And I think we can do it this year. We got as good of a chance as, pretty much all of the contenders, maybe eliminate San Francisco, Baltimore, and Kansas City. That's a tier above us, but below that tier, if the dominoes fall in the right direction, if you will, or the right cards fall in our lap, we get a top seed, a 1 or 2 seed going into the playoffs, get the right matchups, styles make fights. Who the fuck knows? It could be the year. And that's what I want. And I want, ideally, Dak to go win the MVP. And I want Dak to change what I'm about to talk about and get over that playoff hump or that elite defense hump that his been the thorn in his side throughout the entirety of his career and become that quarterback that nobody within the franchise or the fan base has any issue, or any logical people have any issue making him the highest paid quarterback of all time or player of all time. But the fact of the matter is, I think the non-committal side from the franchise and even guys like me comes from this. His career record against playoff qualifying teams, regular season or in the playoffs, that means teams that year that made the playoffs, is 17 and 32. 17 wins and 32 losses. He has 11,000 passing yards, 82 touchdowns, and 47 interceptions in those games. So he has more than, a 1 to 2 interception rate there. That's bad. 82 touchdowns to 47 interceptions is not good. He has a 1.74 touchdown to interception ratio. There, it's right underneath it. I don't know why I didn't just read that. And then beyond that, let's just talk about it year by year. In 2016, he played 4 playoff qualifying teams. He played the opening game against the New York Giants in a loss, 227 yards passing. Obviously, that was his very first game as a rookie. We know what rookie Dak Prescott was. He had to get treated with kid gloves, kind of, very conservative. We ran the ball a lot, had the best rushing attack in the league with rookie Zeke and that dominant offensive line. We actually played the Packers, who beat us in the playoffs and beat them in the regular season, where Dak threw for 294 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And then he had that big-time Steelers game, which was one of the best games of his rookie year, the game where Zeke ended up having the game-winning touchdown at the end of the game. The Steelers were undefeated at that point. We ended their undefeated record, and this was really the game that solidified Dak starting the rest of the year. If you remember, Tony Romo had his infamous press conference, basically passing on the position to Dak. Kind of unnecessary, to tell you the truth, in hindsight. I get it from Romo's standpoint, the emotion. He was our franchise quarterback for so long at that point. Should have probably waited until the season ended to do that bullshit, but whatever. I digress. And then we played the Giants again. The Giants, his rookie year, were the thorn in his side, and then since then, he's just beat the fucking brakes off the Giants. He lost. That was a very bad game. He had 165 yards passing, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. At that point, they were like our kryptonite that season. The room, everybody in the national media that likes to stir the pot with Dallas during that time, undisputed, ironically, was Skip and Shannon. First Take was Stephen A. And everybody that could come on, they were predicting that we would meet up with the Giants in the divisional round once again at this point and lose to them because they just had a nasty defense. I remember they had Snacks Harrison up front, Olivier Vernon coming off the edge. They had the dude that, what was the cornerback's name? Jackrabbit. I forget what his name is. Nickname Jackrabbit, stud. Won't get into how his career ended, but they had a really, really good defense, gave Dak a lot of problems, and they could stop our run game that year. So it was just a bad matchup. They ended up losing in the wild card round to the Packers, who came on and beat us in the playoffs, which was his last game in 2016 against a playoff qualifying team. He played very good in that playoff game, arguably his best playoff game minus the Tampa Bay game. He had 302 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, an interception. Fucking Bryce Butler dropped a touchdown, I remember, and the Aaron Rodgers miraculous throw and Mason Crosby kicking that field goal that hooked in somehow through the air conditioning or whatever it was to beat us that year. So his rookie year, Dak Prescott, he goes 2-3 for 1,300 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions against playoff qualifying teams. In 2017, he played another 5 playoff qualifying teams. He played the Rams and lost with 252 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Not terrible. Lost that game. The Chiefs, he won 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He played the Falcons and lost 176 yards, no touchdowns. I think that was the game where he got sacked like 7 times when Tyron Smith was hurt. Played the Eagles, lost. This was the Eagles Super Bowl year. Unfortunately, had 145 yards and 3 interceptions. Carson Wentz went crazy in that game. got our ass beat. Then played the Eagles again, and we beat them. Eagles rested the starters. Very important to know that. He only had 179 yards and a touchdown. Didn't look good. I remember we almost lost to them without their starters. So we just looked like we could have lost without their starters for a large portion of that game. They go on to fucking win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Very good team. Dak Prescott, in his second year of the NFL, he went 2-3 against playoff qualifiers for 1,000 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. In 2018, he goes 3-4, 1,500 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He lost to the Seahawks. Bad game. 168 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. 2018 is the year to look at really right now when you're thinking about this CeeDee Lamb situation. What I said on last episode, what I think the Cowboys are doing. Quickly, like the Cowboys are going into a training camp where they got Chuma Edoga starting at left tackle. He fucking is going to get his lunch eaten. I mean, Tyler Guyton, we know he's raw. He has to be good enough to beat out Chuma Edoga or whatever the fuck his rookie season if we're not going to be in a world of hurt unless they are capable and willing to move over Tyler Smith to tackle for a year. Do I want to do that? No. But like if you have to start Chuma, move Tyler to left tackle. We're a pass first team. Let's not kid ourselves. Move him to left tackle. Let's not have Dak Prescott get killed and this all be a wash. But 2018 was the season to look at because we had moved on from Dez Bryant and we went in with this receiver by committee approach like we don't need to get a receiver. It's going to be fine. We got a good running game. We got an offensive line. Really didn't because Tyler Smith couldn't stay healthy. Tyron, rather. Sorry. Tyron Smith couldn't stay healthy. And we didn't have any weapons to go to. Dak Prescott was awful. And this is the reason that we didn't extend Dak early the first time. I've always said, and it doesn't get stated enough, the Amari Cooper trade saved Dak Prescott in Dallas in his career, really. Because if he had moved on, the improvements he's made from 2018 to now are astronomical. And that's an oath to him, his work ethic, his discipline, and his ability to constantly improve as a player. Even though he's gone through some coordinator changes, roster changes a little bit, and all that stuff. And that's tip of the cap to Dak for that. But at the same time, 2018 and this entire list is the reason you don't want to marry him. And you've been engaged for 9 years now, and you got cold feet, you're common law married, but you don't want to get married and start the family. So he loses to the Seahawks. He loses to the Texans. 250 yards or less in the first 3 playoff games playoff qualifiers he played. Seahawks, Texans, Saints. We actually beat the Saints. We beat the Eagles. We lost to the Colts, 206 yards and an interception. We beat the Seahawks, 226 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. This is post-Amari trade at this point. We lose to the Rams in the playoffs, 266 and a touchdown. So that year he goes 3-4, 1,500 yards, 5 touchdowns, more interceptions than he has touchdowns in 7. 2018 versus playoff qualifiers. 2019 versus playoff qualifiers, he goes 1-6. All right. Lost to the Saints, 223 yards and a touchdown. Lost to the Packers, 463 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Probably a game where we're losing the entire game. A lot of padding stats there. If you got 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 463 total yards. He beat the Eagles with 239 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He loses to the Vikings with 397 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. He loses to the Packers with 212 yards and an interception. Loses to the Bills, 355 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Loses to the Eagles the last game of the year, missed the playoffs, 265 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. 1-6, 2,100 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. In 2020, he played 3 playoff qualifiers before breaking his leg. He went 0-3. This was the first year after signing his big contract that he's on now that he's due to renegotiate for because it was so important for him and Todd France to get back to the negotiation table as soon as possible. Let's acknowledge everything that's going on. We got a cap issue. We got contract issues with superstars. Some of that's normal. Some of that's how the Cowboys have always operated. There is good and bad to take from both sides of this. But again, this is the contract now. We're into contract number 1 or number 2 with Dak Prescott beyond the rookie deal. We're in the commitment to you as our franchise. 2020, 0-3 versus playoff qualifiers, right? Game 1, 266 and a touchdown. Game 2, 472 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions against the Seahawks. Game 3 against the Browns, 502 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. 0-3. 2021. Let me take a sip. 2021, coming off the injury. We start off the year against the Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champion Tom Brady. He actually has a very good game. Came very close to winning this game. Officiating was sketchy, to say the least. I remember. We lose. He has 403. And this was really 2021. And 2020 probably would have been that for him. But 2021 was the leap year for Dak of entering another tier as a player. He loses that game. We go on to beat the Eagles, 238, 3 tutties. We go on to beat the Pats, who made the playoffs, I guess. 445 yards, 3 tutties, 1 interception. We go on to lose to the Chiefs, 216 yards, 2 interceptions, plays bad. We lose to the Raiders, 375, 2 tutties. We lose to the Cardinals, 226 yards, 3 touchdowns. That was Kyler Murray's biggest game against us in his career. I remember it was like a Thursday night game. He had his whole family in town. Everybody knows his history in the state championships. Fuck that little midget. Go on, and we beat the Eagles. Hurts was out. Doesn't matter. Would have beat his ass too. 295 yards, 5 touchdowns. He stomps on the division, and he deserves the credit for stomping on the division. And then we got our asses fucking beat in the playoffs by the 49ers. 254 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. It's important to acknowledge he got hit a lot in that 49ers game. Didn't do the greatest job protecting him, but we did good enough to win. I think we held the 49ers to 17 points in that game. We did good enough to win, and he lost. And I remember it. The organization remembers it. And we all need to remember it as fans. 27 years old, haven't sniffed a Super Bowl. Let's fucking acknowledge all the bullshit on all sides as we're on this journey to 6. 2022, playoff qualifying teams. He goes 3-3, 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Against the Bucks, he lost to the opener, 134 yards, interception. He didn't play good. Again, that was the whole against elite defenses. This is what Dak looks like. Against the Giants, and this is a reason you don't get re-signed. Years like this, the year before the year, you know what I mean? You lost. We played the Giants, who were the worst team that made the playoffs in 2022. It's the reason the fucking Eagles went on to win the Super Bowl. One of them. He beats the shit out of the Giants. We lost to the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. He had 2 interceptions. In the 2022 season, every single game we lost, you could point to Dak Prescott interceptions of being a major reason we lost, a major reason we didn't win the division. If we would have won the division in 2022 and he got hurt, missed some games, if he didn't get hurt and played the Eagles that first game, the Cooper Rush game that we lost to the Eagles, where it was like their Super Bowl. They brought out Rocky. Meek Mill's probably gay ass. That's fine, but he's probably gay. They brought him out. And all that shit. They beat us. Cooper Rush had like 5 turnovers in that game and minus territory, and we still lost by 1 possession, I think. Yeah, if he played that game, we would have beat him. We were better than the Eagles that went to the Super Bowl. Dak Prescott's better than Jalen Hurts. Mike McCarthy sure as fuck is better than Nick Sirianni. And we were better than that Fugazi team. He ended up playing the Eagles in the second game. Hurts was out, but Dak goes for 347, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Gardner Minshew actually had like the game of his career. We go on. We play the Bucks in the playoffs. Dak's best playoff performance: 305 yards, 4 touchdowns. Retires Tom Brady. Then he plays the fucking 49ers again. Lost 206 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Not good enough in the playoffs. Don't care how you shake it. We're talking about making him the highest paid player of all time per year in the history of the NFL. Right? He'll have 2 massive deals from the Cowboys that gives him more money to ever cry sad tears again. 2023 versus playoff qualifying teams. In 2022, he was 500, 3-3, 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Too many interceptions, too many losses. 2023, and it's when I read this shit, I come in very nice. Dak's a nice, cool guy. Seems like a good husband, good dad, good brother. I understand his story. Think he's a good guy. But again, 27 years old, haven't sniffed a Super Bowl. I've read you the list of quarterbacks that win Super Bowls. Their resume doesn't look like this in these type of games. 2023, he goes 3-5 against playoff qualifying teams. The first one, the 49ers. This game changed our season. I'm going to talk about CeeDee Lamb next. This game changed our season. 153 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Dak Prescott was quoted in saying this was the most humiliating game of my football career. The Niners players were quoted in saying after the game, when we play the Cowboys, we put the game in Dak Prescott's hands because he can't handle it. Just remember that. He has to change that. That has to change. Has to change this year. Rams, 304 yards, 4 touchdowns, interception. He beat the shit out of them. He's at the point to where average, like your lower level, your wild card level, and I know we lost to a wild card team last year. Bad matchup. He played like dog shit. Gonna get into it. He beats the average to mediocre teams in the league, and he shows his ass against them in a good way. Shows his ass, goes crazy. It's the elite, the Niners teams where nothing has changed from 2016 to 2023 going into 2024. Lost to the Eagles. He had 374 yards, 3 touchdowns. That was a bullshit fucking game. We should have beat him. Then he beat the dog shit out of the Eagles in the next one. 271 yards, 2 touchdowns. We beat the piss off of them. We're going to beat the brakes off of them again this year. Don't you forget it. We're going to beat the brakes off of them. We got all these questions, and we got legit ones. And we're going to talk about training camp top to bottom, baby. I'm so fucking pumped about it. So pumped. We're talking about real shit. No more white party. No more Micah Parsons podcast drama. No more bullshit. We got pads popping starting today, and we're going to talk about all of it. But we're going to beat the dust off the Eagles. Fuck the Eagles. We're still the best team in this division. So regardless of what we talk about today, remember, we're the best team in this division. And remember, quarterbacks get worse with Kellen Moore, and they get better when they leave from Kellen Moore. Don't ever forget that. We beat the Eagles the second time, and then we played the Bills. This was the beginning of the end of the season, and this was the beginning of me realizing this is happening again. We're not winning the Super Bowl. After that Eagles win, I am Super Bowls all the way on. We're about to go fuck up the Bills in Buffalo. We're going to beat the Dolphins. I was saying we're going to play 2 of the AFC contenders and show you that we would smash the AFC. Then we're going to beat the Lions. And then we're going to go on. And we're going to be the hottest team in the league. We're going to win the Super Bowl. That's going to happen to me again this year at some point. But that's when that was happening. And then we went to the Bills. We had a stomach bug that went through the locker room. And it's Buffalo late in the year. It was really cold. Dak had 134 yards and interception. He threw the ball way too many times in that game, but we couldn't run the ball. The Bills handled us in Buffalo. I chalked it up to that. Hey, Dak's having the best year of his career. He's shown me enough. Did you see the Seattle game? Did you see everything since we started feeding CeeDee Lamb the ball post 49ers? We stopped trying to be a run-heavy team for the first time in Mike McCarthy's career with Tony Little scrawny-ass Pollard and not a good enough offensive line. We've got it different. We'll be fine. Let's go play the Dolphins on Christmas Eve. Lost. 253 yards and 2 touchdowns, but we lost. Then we beat the Lions, where he had great stats, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Couldn't hair away from losing that game, though. The Lions took over the game. If Dan Campbell didn't go for it 4 times, they would have won the game in overtime. And then the Packers game, man. He had 403 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. This and the Niners game were the worst games of his NFL career. The 403 yards is all garbage time bullshit, and he could have had 10 interceptions instead of 2. There was 10 balls that either went off the hands of Green Bay Packers or receivers for the Cowboys had to defend. And I understand he was pressing because we were down so much, but the worst game of his career. And in some of the worst moments ever through pick sixes and bad plays. And you can sit here, and it's fair to say, Brandon Cooks shouldn't have been running those slant routes that Michael Gallup once ran and these big boy routes to convert third downs where Jair Alexander's and cornerbacks were just jumping and bullying his ass, taking the ball. And yet, that pick 6 to make it 28-7, just lives rent-free in my head. I see it every night. I close my eyes. That was the game ender. All right? And let's talk about 2 other quarterbacks that don't have contracts. Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa. Jordan Love is holding out until he gets a deal. Say what you want about that. It's not Jordan Love's fault that he didn't start until the last year of his contract. It's not his fault it worked out perfect for him this way. But he only started 1 year, and all he did was throw for 4,100 passing yards. That's seventh in the NFL. 32 passing touchdowns. That was second in the NFL. Interceptions, 11, tied for 104th. That doesn't matter where you're ranked at. 11 interceptions. You don't really want over 10. First-year starter, 62.1 QBR, ninth in the NFL. So over touchdowns, passing yards, and QBR, he's top 10 in every category. First year starting, 6'4", 219 pounds. He's 25 years old. He's the same age as Michael Penix and Bo Nix, who got drafted in the first round this year. All right, upside through the roof. I said Dak Prescott's entering his prime at 30 years old. So he's 5 years away from his prime, measuring by that standard. And he's top 10 in every category that fucking matters. His splits, he had 579 attempts, 372 completions, 64% completion percentage, 32 touchdowns to 11 picks, as I said, 77 long, sacked 30 times, 96.1 rating. His home splits, he had 2,100 passing yards, 67% completion percentage, 13 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. On the road, 2,000 passing yards, 61% completion percentage, 19 tutties to 7 interceptions. This is my favorite category right here, especially with quarterbacks, but really with any player, the wins versus losses splits. In wins or ties, he was 199 for 298 for 2,300 passing yards, 66% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns to 1 interception, right? 13 sacks, 112 quarterback rating. What a fucking stud in wins, like everybody. But great splits there. In losses, he was 173, 281, 1,700 yards, 61.6%, 12 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That's really the difference in wins and losses right there. Taking care of the football. If you're a playoff team, your offense is successful in 2024. You got a good offensive mind at the coaching position, I'm going to assume, whether it be your coordinator or your head coach or both. Probably got a good running game. The difference is going to be that touchdown to interception ratio. And honestly, he had a great game against the 49ers in their playoff loss, which I think they should have won. If he doesn't start turning it over, I think he had a fucking dumbass throw the ball across the field, thinks he could get away with something, not getting away with it against the 49ers. He's got special gifts as a passer of the football, but you know, some critical mistakes, they lose the game. It is what it is. But Jordan Love deserves his contract. He's going to get his contract. He's holding out because he knows he can hold out and get his deal. Because where else are they going to go? They don't have anybody else to turn to in Green Bay. They got rid of Aaron Rodgers to move on to him. Like I said, it's not his fault he didn't start until the last year of his deal, pretty much. Right? And if you're asking me if I'm playing GM Shonee Jackson right here, I do sign Jordan Love before I sign Dak Prescott for obvious fucking reasons. He's a lot younger with a higher upside, better skill set. As I said earlier, his ceiling's higher than Dak's, like Trey Lance's ceiling's higher than Dak's. And if you're going to pay the quarterback position, like I say, I pay for ceiling. And there's a scale of confidence that he'll reach that ceiling, you know. Don't get fooled 3, 4, 5 times by the same player. But his ceiling's way higher than Dak. Now, Tua Tagovailoa, that's another story. I would take Dak over Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa, his splits a year ago, 4,600 yards. He led the league in passing yards. He was tied for 5th in passing touchdowns, 29. He had 14 interceptions and a 60.8 QBR. He's too inconsistent, and he gets hurt too easy. Little flimsy little fucker, that Tua Tagovailoa. He's been getting hurt since he was at Alabama. Can't win games in the tub, and especially at the quarterback position. The Dolphins are not committed to Tua Tagovailoa. I would say that more so than Dallas with Dak. And I think the Dolphins are less timid and scared of moving on from Tua than the Cowboys are from moving on from Dak. I think ultimately Dak's going to get his deal. I am scared that he's going to get it before the season starts. I think it'll, at the very least, I want to wait and see what Trey Lance does during training camp and in the preseason. Give it 2-3 weeks. Let him play a preseason game. Let's see how he looks in training camp with some backups, with an iffy offensive line. Let's test that processing speed of his. See if he can handle it and show out in a preseason game or two. If he does, I don't know whether they're going to use that as trade bait or move on to him. But that changes things. If he does, at least wait till the end of the year and try to get Dak to take something at 50 if we don't win the Super Bowl. But I don't know. I think he's going to get it the way the reports are going. Just my vibe. The vibe with Diana Rossini tweeting that out, I think he's going to get the 60 plus a year after CD gets his deal. Because I think the Cowboys are too scared to not be able to upgrade immediately. I don't think Jerry wants to put his balls on the table like he should. And by saying should, it's just because I don't think he wants to commit to this guy. But I don't think he wants Dak to move on and have more success. So I think he's going to get his deal. Tua Tagovailoa, on the other hand, I don't think he's going to get it. His splits, 4,600 passing yards, 69% completion percentage, 29 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. I don't know why you're crying about a deal when you had 14 interceptions and didn't win a playoff game. And also didn't win at the end of the season to get a home playoff game. His wins, 257 yards, 257 completions to 361 attempts, 3,200 passing yards, 23 tutties to 8 interceptions. In losses, 1,300 passing yards, 65% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. So no matter what, he throws too many interceptions. And he has one of the best offensive minds in the league. So, who has a lot of confidence. I don't think he's scared to move on. But we'll see. As of right now, my prediction is Dak's going to get that deal at 60 plus a year. Whether you like that, don't like it, I don't know. We're going to see. The organization's going to do what they're going to do, and I will shift to however we're going to still win a Super Bowl by doing that. We'll have that conversation after the fact. Let's move on to CeeDee Lamb. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Lamb, the best wide receiver in the world, is holding out a training camp as we expected. Should come as a surprise to nobody at all. And yet, it's time to get that deal done. Now, I want to say, from an organizational standpoint, this is not organizational incompetence. And in fact, it really makes a lot of sense. I don't know if they're going to try to bargain and get him a little less. I don't know if he's going to take less. One thing I did see, I don't think CeeDee Lamb, from some reports where he was contemplating showing up to camp, I don't know how true they are, but I can tell you right now, just by watching CD, if you listen to CD talk, if you ever see him mic'd up, if you ever see him in training camp, from training camp clips to, whatever. If he's mic'd up in training camp, this is a guy that loves playing football. He loves it a lot, man. You could just tell by his energy, by his vibe, by the way he plays, his playing style. He never misses any games. I think he's a very durable player naturally. He seems to be very flexible and just a guy that's built to last. And yet, every single football player goes through injuries and nicks throughout the season. You can count on CD to show up and play at the highest level that there is to play. And he is coming off the greatest season in franchise history. I think if and when CeeDee Lamb gets signed long-term, because he ain't going anywhere, man. Let me tell you something. CeeDee Lamb wears the number 88, and like I said, he's coming off the biggest year in franchise history. The Cowboys just signed Zeke out of flat-out love and respect. Jerry Jones is going to bed crying every night that Ezekiel Elliott wasn't walking through that locker room. All right? And I'm going to tell you right now, there's never going to be any fucking Zeke slander on the SJ show. Never, not once, not ever, not ever, 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 ever is there going to be Zeke slander on the SJ show. What? You motherfuckers don't got any gratitude? The dude gave his life to the Dallas Cowboys. It's not his fault that Jason Garrett ran him into the ground. And yet, he's going to serve his purpose here in Dallas. He's probably going to be our starting running back by the looks of things. And who knows? Maybe the snow bunnies that Zeke loves in Dallas and the energy in Dallas Cowboys and vibes alone is going to rejuvenate him a little bit. But just strictly off vibes, Zeke's got a spot on this roster in my eyes. Anyhow, CD ain't going anywhere. Like I said, there's rumors that he could get the deal done by this weekend or mid next week. I think by the latest the deal gets done by mid next week. Just because what's going to happen, and like I said earlier, first and foremost, I think from an organizational standpoint, it's important to know that CD's on his rookie deal. Last year, Zach Martin was holding out a training camp. He was already on his second deal. Whatever fees that come to the player for holding out a training camp once you're on that second deal, like Zach Martin was on, get worked into your third contract. So that was why a year ago, it was cockamamie to let that thing linger on. Not only is he one of the greatest offensive linemen of all time, Zach Martin, but you were going to have to pay those fines back to him in his deal that he re-signed anyways. With CD's situation, the way the CBA has it worked out is the Cowboys are going to be able to waive whatever fines come towards CeeDee Lamb. for missing training camp, missing practices. He gets fined per practice that he misses, and then he gets fined like a third of his salary for every preseason game that he misses. So that's not anything to sneeze at. And the Cowboys are going to be able to waive those. They're not going to have to worry about them when they sign them. But I don't really think it comes down to that necessarily, as much as you got this Dak Prescott situation, you got other contract situations on the team. It doesn't really hurt for CeeDee Lamb to miss a week of practice. Like if CeeDee Lamb misses a week and a half of training camp, he's still going to show up and be the best in the world. He's going to be in shape. He's going to be ready to go. And that's just a few less hits that he takes, or a few less, opportunities for something to happen to him to go away. It's okay. It's really not that big of a deal. He's going to show up. Him and Dak got the connection that they have. They're going to be fine. He's going to be fine as a football player, and the Cowboys organization knows that. More or less, is it juggling with Dak Prescott? Like I said earlier, the Cowboys got a rookie left tackle in Chuma Adogba that are going to try to block Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. They're going to get their fucking lunch eaten, at least early on. So I anticipate the Cowboys are not setting the world on fire without CeeDee Lamb in training camp. That gives some negotiation leverage one way or the other. If the offense is struggling, you look at Dak Prescott after you re-sign CeeDee Lamb and you say, look at what you did before and after CeeDee Lamb. I know that's obvious, but how are we going to give you 60 plus a year when in 2018 you struggled before the Amari Cooper trade? We removed CeeDee Lamb from you going into this season in training camp, and you're clearly struggling without him and would clearly struggle going into the year without that superstar. So maybe that helps you negotiate getting Dak or painting the picture to Dak Prescott, because he does hold all the leverage. The organization knows that. He knows that. We all know that. Can you paint a picture to him if he struggles to do anything offensively without CeeDee Lamb in camp to say, Dak, you got the leverage and you could get us for 60 plus a year probably. We want you. We don't want you to leave. You can get us, but are you willing to take less to win more and to improve your legacy as a player, as a Dallas Cowboy, potentially trying to get to the Hall of Fame? Because I think that matters to Dak. And what does that mean? He takes 55? Does that mean he takes 58? Does that mean he takes 50? Maybe this helps paint that picture to him and get him to take a better deal, because he's already made God knows how many money on and off the field, right? Or the flip side of that, Dak doesn't struggle and other weapons step up, make a name for themselves. Maybe that connection that you saw between him and Brandon Cooks towards the end of the year gets better. The timing on their deep balls has improved even more. Jake Ferguson is making waves. Maybe the run game, maybe Cooper Beebe breaks out. You got 2 all-pro guards. Maybe the run game shocks us. That undrafted kid comes in and plays well. Or somebody else, maybe Rico Dowdle. Who knows? And if that's the case, you go back to CeeDee Lamb and you say, yeah, we're not giving you Justin Jefferson money, brother. So either way, from an organizational standpoint, the CeeDee holdout isn't that crazy. But let me just remind you how great CeeDee Lamb is at the age of 25 years old, mind you. Very young football player. There's first-round draft picks that are 25 years old that just got drafted. 135 receptions, first in the NFL, first all-time as a Dallas Cowboy. 1,749 yards, franchise record, second in the NFL, only behind Tyreek Hill, and he came close to passing him. And that was really, I'll read his game log, all after the San Francisco game. 12 touchdowns, third in the NFL, so he's top 3 in every fucking category that matters last year. That's why he was first-team All-Pro. His wins and loss splits are what I want to read the most, because it's the epitome of last year, and it's the epitome of what I was talking about with Dak Prescott 2018 pre-Amari, what I think Dak Prescott will be 2024 without CeeDee Lamb. In wins, receptions, 103 receptions, 1,200 receiving yards, 12.5 yards per receptions, 11 touchdowns, 92 being the long. In losses, he only had 32 receptions. So wins to losses, 103 to 32 receptions. Obviously, we won a lot more than we lost, so that's part of that. But 464 yards, 14.5 yards per reception, 1 touchdown. So when you force feed CeeDee Lamb, you do a lot better than when you don't give him the ball a lot. Let's talk about the losses. And really, the first 5 games in general. Because we know, reports were out there, after the humiliating San Francisco game, CeeDee Lamb complained to the coaching staff and Dak Prescott alike on his usage, and the offense changed entirely after that and became what at times looked like the best offense in the NFL. So the first 5 games of the year, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 77 yards, a win. 11 targets, 13 receptions, 143 yards, and a win versus the Jets. And then in a loss versus the sorry ass Cardinals, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 53 yards. In a win against New England, 6 targets, 4 receptions. In the humiliating loss against San Francisco, he had 5 targets, 4 receptions for 49 yards, 12.3 a reception, and he was open a lot more than he got the ball thrown to in that game, which was part of his frustration. Goes on to go crazy for 3 games, lots of targets, lots of yards, breaking records for a 3-4 game stretch. And then you get to the end of the year where you lose it again. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 53 yards. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 118 yards. And then in the playoff loss, 17 targets, 9 receptions, 110 yards. So at the very least, tip of the cap to Mike McCarthy, because he stopped fucking around with CeeDee Lamb. Like those early games with 4 targets or 6 targets stopped happening. Like even in the loss when it wasn't working with Green Bay, 17 targets to 9 receptions, 110 yards. Like Mike McCarthy did a good job of realizing this is the best player on this offense. It's not even fucking close. I'm going to get him the football, win, lose, or draw. Going to live and die by the horse I got. Now let's talk about what we got beyond CeeDee Lamb, right? CeeDee Lamb, the weapons beyond him. I think in order it probably goes Jake Ferguson, then Brandon Cooks. But Brandon Cooks is obviously the number 2 receiver, so let's start with him. His splits from a year ago was 54 receptions, 657 yards, 12.2 yards per catch, 8 touchdowns, 37 was his long. And wins and losses, 602 yards receiving, 46 receptions and wins, 7 touchdowns. In losses, 55 yards, 8 receptions, 1 touchdown. Okay, 657 yards is what I think everybody's kind of snarky towards right now. Like, we need at least 800 out of him if he's going to be a true number 2 guy. But he is a true reliable number 2 guy. I think it's important to understand he's only 30 years old. Let's see if I can pull up a career overview of him. I don't know if I can. Yeah. This is a guy that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1,000 yard seasons. For 1, 2, 3, 4 different teams, he's had over 1,000 yards. All right, he's had a few years like this one where he's between 650 yards to 700 yards receiving. His rookie year, he only had 550 yards, and then his last year with the Rams, he only had 583 yards. Brandon Cooks has not fallen off. Brandon Cooks can still fly. He's still very, very fast. His body and everything physically, he is still there. I think he is a very, very quality number 2 receiver. I think it just took time for Brandon Cooks and Dak Prescott to get a connection, especially with the deep ball. Dak Prescott was more used to throwing to a slower Michael Gallup on those deep targets, where Michael Gallup was running under those motherfuckers that were underthrown a little bit. You know, he wasn't that burner that Brandon Cooks was. Dak was underthrowing Cooks and throwing the ball all over the place, missing Brandon Cooks where he was open on deep balls. And that needs to be acknowledged, where that's another 50 to 100 yards that you're taking away on missed opportunities, right? By the end of the year, they really started clicking. They have that deep corner route that he was hitting Cooks on in the end zone multiple times. And he had some massive games. Like the second Giants game, Brandon Cooks had 10 targets for 9 receptions, 173 yards, 19.2 yards per reception, and a touchdown. I mean, that's number 1 receiver numbers. Nobody just steps in and fucking does that. That's washed. And from that point going forward, he had 42 yards, 72 yards, 45 yards, 37, 10, 14, 14. So those 2 low numbers are in losses. So it's not like we're better when Brandon Cooks ain't getting the ball. And now I know he's got to get open, and I think that the usage on Brandon Cooks is very important. Don't use him like a big-bodied receiver. Don't have him running those 3rd and 4 slant routes where a corner's going to body him and he's going to get smashed. He's not built for that. You got to find somebody else on this roster that can do that, and there's got to be someone that can. Receiver position ain't that fucking hard, brother. What do y'all do? Run around and catch the ball? What do you do? Find a number 3 guy. These guys fall off trees. Undrafted, late round picks, fall off trees. Against the Lions, he had 5 receptions on 8 targets, 60 yards, and a tutty. He had a tutty against Washington. He had 47 yards in the playoff loss. Brandon Cooks is a good receiver. If him and Dak can dial up their connection, especially maybe a week in camp without CeeDee Lamb, OTAs without CeeDee Lamb, they can get that connection up. Brandon Cooks still got 3 years of good football left in him, I think. His body holds up. He's still very, very fast. He's a very smart player. You don't have all those 1,000 yards receiving as a football player if you're not very smart and very good. Let me bring it back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 yard years. He has 9,200 career receiving yards, so he could eclipse 10,000 career receiving yards this year. I promise you that's on his mind. I promise you that's a goal of his for sure. So you got a hungry player going into a contract year in Brandon Cooks, trying to extend his career. I promise you he wants to play football for a longer period of time, and he should. He still can. He's got a lot left in the tank. The next target, Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson, ceiling to be the best tight end in the world. That's his ceiling. And I don't think the national media has caught on to that with Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson has the chance to be the best tight end in the NFL, if not one of the top 3 guys. From last year, this was his breakout year a year ago. I hear a lot of people talk about Jake Ferguson breakout. Yeah, he might go from really, really good to all pro. And I guess that's fair to call it a breakout year. But he's already a fucking stud and a half, man. And hopefully we get a second guy there to weaponize him a little bit more and to help out. But last year he had 71 receptions, 761 yards, 5 touchdowns, 10.7 yards per reception. In wins, Jake Ferguson has 46 receptions, 505 yards, 4 touchdowns. In losses, 25 receptions, 256 yards, 2.2 yards per receptions, and a touchdown. All right. His game log got off to a little bit of a slow start with 2 receptions, 11 yards, 3 receptions, 11 yards. He was getting the targets, 7 targets and 4 targets respectively in the first 2 games. Then he had 7 targets for 5 yards, 7 targets for 7 yards. It was really, I'm reading that wrong. Sorry about that. He had first game 11 yards, second game 11 yards, third game 48 yards. New England he had 78 yards. San Fran 28, LA 15, LA 47. That was the Chargers and the Rams back to back. Where did he start going off? Really, that Eagles game where he had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 91 yards. And then against Seattle was the best game of the year where he basically retired Jamal Adams, if you guys remember. But 77 yards on 8 targets and 6 receptions with a touchdown. Then he had another 72 yards against the Eagles, 44 against Buffalo, 45 against Miami, 33 against Detroit, 69 against Washington, 93 in the playoff loss against Green Bay on 12 targets and 10 receptions. He's a stud. He's an all-time vibes guy. The Jake Ferguson-Zeke combo in that locker room is elite as it gets in the league, and you cannot understate how much that matters. It does matter, and I love it coming from a tight end and a running back. 2 vibes guys. He's dating one of the Cavender twins, him and fucking Carson Beck. I like that out of a tight end. Don't like it out of a quarterback. Not to get off topic, that's why I say Carson Beck's too horny. That and a few other things. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. But Jake Ferguson, I love everything about him out of Wisconsin. Another young man, 25 years old, born 1999, 6'5", 244. So between Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson, you add CeeDee Lamb, we got 3 very good weapons. So we can panic about the run game all we want. I think the run game will go as far as our run blocking goes, as far as Cooper Beebe and those 2 guards take us. But we'll see on that. It's not going to matter. We'll still have one of the top 10 conservatively offenses in the league because of these weapons that we have. And then you move on. Who's going to be the third weapon? The third weapon differentiates whether we're closer to 10 or closer to number 1 offensively. I'm out on Jalen Tolbert. Why am I out on Jalen Tolbert? Because it's been year 3. Like I said earlier, the receiver position ain't that fucking hard. It's the easiest position in the sport. You can get pissed at me if you want it. all you want on that position. There's more receivers than there are anything. These guys fall off fucking trees. And Jalen Tolbert, I think, has a very great skill set, but he doesn't got the mindset. I don't think he has the confidence to play well. He's shown us that. He's not that dog. When he enters the regular season, he looks like a timid player to me, right? Whereas there's a guy in Jalen Brooks and maybe some other guys. I'll pull up Todd Archer had his projected 53-man roster that he released. So let me pull that up real quick. You got CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Turpin, and Jalen Brooks, who he projects to make the team. If they take a sixth guy, he's projecting Flournoy. A lot of people are really, really high on Flournoy. I would like more of a Jalen Brooks style guy to step up and be that. I don't think Flournoy is going to step up and be the number 3 guy. Some people do. Maybe he will. If he does, oh well. Like I said, I'm out on Tolbert being that guy. So I think this comes between Jalen Brooks out of South Carolina or maybe some other dude that we're not even talking about at all that enters camp. This is the receiver position. Maybe some savage that doesn't know he's not supposed to be good enough yet comes in, makes some noise, and gets somebody else cut. That happens every year somewhere. You know what I mean? And then there's the discussion of Cavante Turpin and Deuce Vaughn. So the Cowboys do a thing every offseason where they act like they're going to do something offensively. This offseason, it's with Deuce Vaughn and Turpin, using them in the slot and out of the backfield, showing this creative stuff out of OTAs. We'll see if they do it in the regular season. I hope they do. Cavante Turpin probably deserves more usage. He's an absolutely electric kick returner and punt returner, and I think that he's going to have a massive season with the new kickoff rules. The fact that they can't run down there until he catches the ball or whatever the rule is, good luck, man. Good luck, because he is elite at making the first guy miss, and if and when he makes the first guy miss, he's gone. He's one of the fastest players in the world. So he's going to have an elite year doing that, and he's been a lot better at receiver. I don't have his splits pulled up. I guess I can. But he's been a lot better at receiver than people give him credit for, I think. Because when he plays, he makes plays. Let me see what he averages per reception. At home, 14.2 yards per reception. And on the road, 10.6. Or 8. So he's 10.6 average. He had 12 receptions for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns. He scores a lot of touchdowns when he touches the ball. And so I think using him out of the slot, like think about Cole Beasley. It has his weight at 1.75 meters. I don't know what the fuck that is, but he's about 5'6", 5'7", like 160 pounds maybe. Very tiny guy. So can he hold up if he goes up in usage? I don't know, but there's only one way to find out. Maybe him and a combo of him and Deuce Vaughn. If Deuce Vaughn can't do something out of a slot and out of the backfield this year, he might get cut. And you might go like Zeke, Dowdle, and Royce Freeman and the fullback as your 4 running backs. Hunter Lipke. And I think Hunter Lipke is going to be a very good player and maybe play more out of the backfield as a running back. But the third weapon is very important to find, and CeeDee Lamb holding out this week, I think also kind of gives you a chance to look at that. Guys are going to get more reps with CeeDee Lamb not being in camp. And also guys are going to get more targets and more opportunities without CeeDee Lamb being that security blanket in camp. So let's not be all doom and gloom on CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott. Understand big money players, superstar athletes with superstar agents, the best agents in the league, that negotiate the very best contracts that their players could ever possibly get in every way imaginable, not just financially, but with incentives, with no trade clauses, with no franchise tag clauses, and all that shit. That those contracts take a very long time to get done. And it's not all because of organizational incompetence. It's not all doom and gloom, and we're going to beat the brakes off our division in the Eagles. We're going to be contending. We're going to be in the conversation. Let's move forward. Trayvon Diggs is not going to be ready for training camp, and I don't think he'll be ready and playing at 100% till week 4, week 5. I fully anticipate Trayvon Diggs starts the season on the PUP list. Rumor has it, and this is a bit disappointing, because really, I didn't expect Trayvon to be ready week 1, given when he got hurt. You can't anticipate every NFL athlete makes some rapid ACL recovery. They're not going to. But it's disappointing to hear he did not make an aggressive approach to his rehab. And that's the reports coming out of Dallas and just some rumors coming with Trayvon Diggs. And so he is not ready for training camp. I don't think he's going to be. What does that mean, right? The natural timeline would have probably had him ready for week 2, week 3 anyways, just being a normal person. But with him not being really ready to go, probably going to start the season on the PUP list. Do they bring back Stephon Gilmore? Does another guy step up? Does Eric Scott, who fought his ass off in OTAs from what I heard, does he step up into that role? Is it him that becomes the number 3 cornerback? Because right now on the outside, you got DaRon Bland, and are they working Jordan Lewis in on the outside instead of the nickel? I like Jordan Lewis. I think he's a hell of a football player. I think if he played on the outside, he's not going to get his fucking ass beat. But you're going from having basically nothing but all-pro level play on the outside the last 2 years between Trayvon, DaRon Bland, and Stephon Gilmore, who's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, to moving Jordan Lewis from the slot to the outside. You're taking a step back there. And maybe it works because in Zimmer's scheme, you're not going to be taking as many risks. You're not going to be in as much man coverage. And Jordan Lewis is a very smart football player that's very physical and a very good open field tackler. So at the end of the day, don't panic if it is Jordan Lewis. And I promise you, Mike Zimmer's not going to go out there with bad cornerback play. Mike Zimmer's a secondary guy. He understands what bad cornerback play leads to. You never get off the fucking field. You got to play safe. More bend than don't break than he already is as a coordinator. He's not going to do that. But that may be what they look at to begin with. The player I'm looking at is Kalen Carson. This kid is a stud out of Wake Forest, right? In my opinion. Sorry, let me see when this pulls up. I should have done this beforehand and let this load. But it's not loading right now. I'm watching Kalen Carson's highlights. The reason I love this kid more than anything, I think he was good at Wake Forest. There's a lot to like about him, but it's his physicality as a football player. Everything I said about Jordan Lewis, this kid has. When you watch a football player on tape, this is what the fuck it looks like, man. I mean, he aggressively attacks the football in coverage. He attacks the ball carriers in open space. He attacks making tackles as soon as possible. There's a difference in a DB that can make a tackle, that can be where he's supposed to be, and secure a tackle when he absolutely has to. And then there's a DB that wants to make every single play on the field and wants to make every tackle. Kalen Carson, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm watching his highlights. I don't have his all 22 pulled up. I'm sure there's some lowlights that you can watch as well. This is frustrating. But I'm sure that you could watch some lowlights as well. I'm sticking to the highlights. He has a ceiling to be like a DaRon Bland. And by that, I mean go from a guy fighting for a roster spot and playing time to being one of the best corners in the league. If you're able to tackle in the open field like this in the modern schemes with RPO, with your West Coast schemes that get your McDaniels, your Shanahans that work the screen game, that get guys, and there's talented players like Deebo Samuel, Jalen Waddle, all of those weapons out in open space to make players make plays in open space. And this guy can do it the way he can, as well as play tight coverage, get the ball, take it away from you. Yeah, this guy's going to be a special player. I think that he's going to surpass Eric Scott. But if one of those guys steps up, that solves a lot of problems. Maybe you don't have to sign Stephon Gilmore, or maybe you do sign Stephon Gilmore and you just are rich in the secondary, which is never an issue to have defensively. So I'm excited to watch that in camp, the cornerback battles, who steps up in the absence of Trayvon Diggs, and then who's the 3 corners when Trayvon Diggs comes back. Is it what it was going to be last year? Does Stephon Diggs come back, and is it Trayvon, Stephon, and DaRon Bland, which I'm more than happy with? Or does one of these other guys step up? Because at the end of the day, I don't know if Dallas wants to move DaRon back inside. I think DaRon is better inside than he is outside, and he was just all pro on the outside. So I get why you don't want to move an all pro corner from the outside to inside. I get it, every reason that you want to do that. But if you got a Hall of Famer and another all pro, both on the outside, why the hell not? Because he's elite inside. And if he plays that slot spot like he was the first 2 games of the year, you realize how many turnovers we were getting? He's a physical cornerback that knows how to get the football away. And he's so smart that he got 8-9 interceptions in his all-pro year last year with way less risk than what Trayvon Diggs takes. Trayvon tries to jump every single route. Every single route he wants to jump it and pick it off. Deron wasn't doing that, and he was still getting an interception every single game and taking them back to the house. So, interested to see who breaks out there. And speaking of breakouts, let's get into breakouts and who needs to break out by position in training camp. And then also, like, are we going to sign anybody? Because there's no running backs to sign. Get that out of your head. Unless we trade for somebody, the running backs are gone. The Cowboys put themselves in a position where they didn't want to sign any of the free agent running backs, and I don't blame them. I don't really want to do that either. We're not the Eagles. They had to draft a guy, and the draft just didn't work out where they were ever in a spot to use the pick that they had on a guy that they thought was valuable enough for that pick. So that's why we're where we're at in the running game. The running game is going to go as far as our offensive line can take us. And maybe that's good. Like, what if we rush for 1,400 yards? Nobody's talking about that. I don't know if it's by running back by committee, if it's Dowdle, if it's somebody else. But if Cooper Beebe turns out to be what I think he's going to be, we have two all-pro mauling guards. Running game's going to be fine. So that's neither here nor there. We're not going to be able to get another running back. Do we sign Stephon Diggs at corner? And what the fuck do we do on the interior defensive line? Like, we've been bad there for 20 years, it feels like. But we can't just go in with Mozzie Smith as our only one technique. I mentioned on another podcast, I think we're going to sign Linval Joseph. Linval Joseph, his big ass probably does not want to do training camp. And I understand that. So I imagined that's on the back burner. We'll sign him a few weeks in the camp or at the end of camp. He'll come in, plug and play like Stankin Hankins was last year for us as our interior one tech, right? That big ass dude in the middle. And he'll be very serviceable for us. The good thing is, going into our breakouts, let's start at number one. DeMarvion Overshown and the young linebackers. Whether it's him and Leafau, those are the two guys that I need and want to break out. I am very happy with the signing of Kendricks at middle linebacker because now you just implemented a very smart, very serviceable former Pro Bowl inside linebacker in Kendricks, right? And it's very important to have him because now you got a guy like Damone Clark who's probably maybe outside of Overshown the most athletic guy in that room. If not, he's more athletic than Overshown probably is. He's the most athletic guy in that room, but he's not the smartest guy by any stretch of the imagination. I'll tell you that for free. If you don't direct Damone Clark where he needs to go, you're in fucking trouble, right? But if you got somebody like Kendricks that's going to go out there and say, hey, they're running it to the right, shoot your gap, hit whatever you see, Damone Clark's going to play great because he could do very good at that. Hey, it's a pass, drop back into your curl flat. He can do that if he's pointed in the right direction. If not, he's not going to know what the fuck hit him, right? So, one, you already got a guy. Hopefully he stays healthy and a veteran inside linebacker that knows the system as well as anybody. Zimmer knows as well as anybody. That's going to direct the guys like Damone Clark and even Overshown when he needs it in the right direction. If Overshown steps up to be the playmaker that we all know that he can be, especially if you're a Longhorns fan, fly around, hit people, make plays in coverage. He has a very high ceiling. He's always had a high ceiling since high school. He needs to stay healthy. Knock on wood, stay healthy, and take another step up from what he was even going to be last year, coming off an injury. Easier said than done, but if he breaks out, peaches. We haven't had great linebacker play in a long time, man. And I talk about the issues with the interior defensive line. Really elite linebacker plays, guys that can stuff the run and get back in cover, which Zimmer's going to require you to do both. We'll take this defense a long ways, and maybe quite possibly that'll be the thing to get us over the playoff hump. So, the linebacker spot, Leafau, the young rookie who they're raving about. Zimmer is raving about this kid. And I love the kid's film. You know, I've heard some knocks on physicality. There ain't nothing about his tape. And I'll be the first one to knock somebody on physicality defensively. There ain't nothing on Leafau's tape that tells me he's not a dog or doesn't have physicality. He's very physical, very cerebral. If he hits, that is the linebacker of the future. That is the franchise inside linebacker that the Cowboys have been needing for 10, 15 years. Like, LVE was good and serviceable, but Leafau's ceiling is a lot higher than LVE. If he can be that damning presence in the middle with his coverage skills and cerebralness at the linebacker position, he can be our linebacker for the next decade and solve a lot of defensive problems, like if you have a quarterback offensively, right? So that's a guy I'm looking for. Another guy, Kalen Carson. I just brought him up. Let me see if this is pulled up yet. No, it's not. Whatever. Kalen Carson, that's another one. Jalen Brooks is another one. Cooper Beebe, the last one, the center position. It looks like they're going to go into camp like coaches do and start Brock Hoffman. I think Brock Hoffman is a very serviceable backup center, but that's where I'm going to stop it at. You want to talk about a running game having issues? If we go in with Brock Hoffman and what's his ass starting to tackle instead of Tyler Guyton or Tyler Smith, we're in a world of hurt offensive line wise. This Dak Prescott conversation, if he doesn't have a contract, that answers it for you right there. They don't care about winning if they don't go into this season with Cooper Beebe starting at center. That's going to cause so many problems. Your running game's going to be fucking dead. Dak Prescott's going to get killed. We're not going to re-sign him, and we're hitting the reset button, and that's fine. But I don't think that's what they're doing. I expect Cooper Beebe to start. Need him to have a breakout camp. I want to hear every day how Cooper Beebe's just having a pancake fest, dude. Pancake fest from Cooper Beebe every day. And then there's the guys that absolutely have to break out. Mozzie Smith has to, or he's got to kick rocks, and we need to figure something else out. The first two guys on my list on must breakouts are our last two first round draft picks, Mozzie Smith and Tyler Guyton. They absolutely have to break out. Okay, we cannot go into the season with Chuma Odogba starting at tackle, and Mozzie Smith can't be dealing with. And you know what? Like, I care about my mental health just as much as the next guy. If it's so bad that affects his play, he has to go figure that out. We can't be dealing with that in the season, and we can't like miss again on an interior defensive lineman. It's one thing when Tristan Hill ends up being a shithead and a bust, and he was a second round draft pick. Second round draft picks hurt. Don't get me wrong when they fell, and we've had a lot of those fell. But back to back first round failures will be the end of Mike McCarthy. It'll be the end of this era in Dallas. Like, that'll force the reset button. So Mozzie Smith has to improve. He has to care more. He has to play better. And he's even serviceable against the mid-tier teams as well. But he needs to make a difference against the best teams. We spent a first-round draft pick on Mozzie Smith. We'll be looking back in 4 years talking about players that were available that could have been serviceable to Dallas that we didn't take if he doesn't have a good camp and a good season. Tyler Guyton, I know you're raw. I know that we drafted a raw player with the first round draft pick. We need you to be better than Chuma. Be better than Chuma and develop as the season goes on. You can help a tackle, you can chip, you can use Ferguson, you can use Schoonamaker, you can use Zeke, and give him some help as long as he needs it. He's athletic enough to develop fast, I believe. We got to get that out of him, right? And then again, one of the young linebackers to step up, and then a receiver or a fourth weapon option, whether it be the Turpin Vaughn running back situation or Jalen Brooks, another receiver to step up. All right, so that's our training camp conversation. It was an hour and 11 minutes of training camp conversation. I'm gonna have one last talk to end this podcast on Skip Bayless, and we'll clip this separately. We'll have timestamps. I'll do a better job of doing that so you guys can hop around. Skip Bayless got fired from Fox Sports 1, right? And I think it's very important to what I'm doing, sports media in general, to discuss this. It's big news. And now the writing was on the wall with Skip Bayless for a very long time and what that show was and his inability to progress and have self-awareness of who he is versus who the people that were working with him are, right? I'm going to talk about Skip Bayless's timeline and all of that shit. But Skip Bayless in general is one of the least self-aware, socially detached human beings I think I've ever seen in my life. Now, spilt water on myself. He's 71 years old and that happens. But let's give you a timeline of Skip Bayless in his life. Skip Bayless in high school, he played on his high school basketball team where he infamously averaged 1 point a game. He was sorry, right? And it's not just a Skip Bayless bash fest, but Skip Bayless has been bashing motherfuckers for 30 years, so who gives a fuck? He was sorry as shit as a high school basketball player. And the story is his high school English teacher told him that he should start writing a sports column for the high school newspaper. So, as you can imagine, 1 point a game at high school average, right? I think if you just use your best judgment on Skip Bayless socially and his personality, he might have been an annoying asset to that basketball team. Not only as a player, but in the locker room, vibe wise. Skip was probably talking about players who was good, who was not, who was clutch, who isn't, all the time getting on people's nerves. And oftentimes, when an English teacher or somebody like that pulls a kid to the side and suggests to do something like work right for the high school newspaper, it's because the kid's kind of a doofus and they feel bad for him. That's fine. That's why I say in some situations, bullying is a good thing. It led Skip Bayless to his career that made him millions and millions and millions of dollars. So there's nothing to feel bad for, right? He starts writing for his high school newspaper, goes on, gets accepted into the University of Vanderbilt as an English and history major, and then he became the sports editor of their student newspaper, right? So in high school newspaper, college newspaper, imagine Skip Bayless writing about the Vanderbilt Commodores quarterback not being clutch enough, right? So that was his high school experience and his college experience. He goes on from college. He gets his first job as the Miami Herald, writing sports features, and then he goes on to work for the Los Angeles Times, where he really made his name writing stories on the Los Angeles Dodgers, the drama within that team. He started to get some traction, and his first big time job that made Skip Bayless was when he became the lead columnist for the Dallas Morning News, which became the Dallas Times Herald. Skip Bayless' story at the Dallas Morning News and Dallas Times Herald is as infamous as it gets. If you don't know, look into it. He was pretty much the reason that SMU got the death penalty. You know, you could say that fairly. He started writing books about the Cowboys in the 90s that made him a lot of money, kind of made him famous, got him popular outside of the city of Dallas. Famously wrote the book Hellbent, where he made up rumors and a story about Troy Aikman being gay, put that in his book, published it, although he went on to say that every single source that he had on the rumor went on to tell him that those rumors are not true, that they created those rumors, and that there was never any merit to anything with those rumors. And Deion Sanders infamously challenged him on national television about him making up rumors about his quarterback being a homosexual, which at the time was a much, much bigger deal than it is now. This was the 90s that we're talking about. And he challenged Skip Bayless for writing fake columns, challenged his integrity of a man. And I want you to know, it's very well known that Deion and Troy didn't even get along well at that time. They do now, they didn't then. And this might have been the start of their friendship, Deion going and defending him on national television. So as you know, going back to the 90s, Skip Bayless made his hay being a snake. He was a snake with the SMU program. He was a snake making up stories about Troy Aikman being gay, who has never been gay and isn't gay. And it doesn't matter if it was, but like he's not. And he made that shit up. And obviously the SMU stuff, right? Nonetheless, he's always been resented by his colleagues, by his peers, and by the athletes that he was writing about and covering, no matter where he went to this point. At the end of the 90s, I think he started to understand that he was really ahead of the curve, as most people were, of getting into going from journalism to sports talk radio, sports talk media, that we all really know him for in our generation, going from early 2000s to now, over the course of the last 30 years of Skip Bayless, right? He started the show Cold Pizza at ESPN, which was an abject failure, right? And then they started First and 10, which was the prelude, if you will, to what became First Take. Woody, whatever his last name is, I forget what his name is, the guy that did First and 10 with him, quit because of Skip Bayless, and he has been very, very open and honest about that. Some of the terrible fights they got in, the snake that Skip Bayless is, just the terrible person and human being that he thinks that Skip Bayless is. And this First and 10 show really started hot take television that destroyed sports media. And this is what so many colleagues like Dan Le Batard, Marcellus Wiley, you name whoever that have come across Skip Bayless, worked with them, worked on the same networks as Skip Bayless, have talked about their issue is with Skip Bayless and First Take and even Stephen A. Smith at times and what that created. It destroyed and hijacked sports media and sports talk television for at least a decade plus. First Take was such a phenomenon that it revolutionized what we watched, how we watched it, to even when the podcasting world and this stuff started to begin making its way, so many people basically did a spin-off of First Take, and it all became just journalists and talking heads that never played, eliminating the athlete's opinion, the former coach opinion, and making hot take opinions way more serviceable and popular than any other thing. And this was years and years and years before YouTube, podcasting, all this stuff existed, where nowadays we got more content than we know what to do with, and we don't have to watch this shit, which was the demise of it. But First Take started that, and his ego and lack of awareness ended the relationship at First Take, right? So Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith and everybody involved understand that he gave Stephen A. Smith an opportunity to come on television when he had already been fired from ESPN and was only allowed to work on radio at that point from ESPN after working his way back from being fired to where he was at this point. So he gets the credit for giving him that chance, but Skip and his narcissistic ego took that credit to a level that it never needed to get to, right? And he thought that he was the reason Stephen A. Smith became Stephen A. Smith, and not the electric personality and wit and smarts and Stephen A.'s charisma that made Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A. Smith was always going to be Stephen A. Maybe he got fired because he needed to fix a few things or work out some kinks like we all do at some point in our life, right? But what he did is he did that. He went and adjusted, and he came back, and now he's the Stephen A. that we all know. But Skip's ego got in the way of this. They started to have a lot of issues. There were some infamous takes. And going back to 1st and 10, I think something, if you haven't done your research on Skip Bayless just getting put in his place by athletes over the years, and how Skip Bayless went out of his way to box athletes out of getting on network television so he did not get exposed for his lack of knowledge, because it wasn't ever just okay for Skip to have a hot take and be a hot take guy. He had to feel and believe like his opinion mattered more than it ever did, and that he was more educated than anybody ever thought he was on sports, on winning, and what it takes to do so. I just lost my notes. But that was the issue with Skip Bayless, right? Where am I at? Here we go. That was the issue with Skip Bayless, right? And then, like I said, he didn't understand the superstar he had right in front of him and thought it was because of him. So they break up. He moves on to Fox Sports 1. Stephen A. stays at ESPN. Essentially, my belief in hindsight and from the outside looking in is that ESPN chose Stephen A. Smith over Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless leaves to Fox Sports 1, restarts what he already had in First Take and Undisputed, and he hires Shannon Sharpe, right? Shannon Sharpe was in between jobs. He got fired from CBS. You know how network television is, all uptight. They fucking fumbled with Shannon Sharpe. They know it now. We know it now. Everybody knows it now. Shannon Sharpe is basically another version of Joe Rogan. Like, why the amount of numbers he does on his podcast, the importance of his podcast off of the ESPN platform, and what he's doing in that community to athletes in his space, as anybody in the world. He has the most watched interview of all time with Cat Williams, right? So Skip Bayless had Stephen A. Smith, who I would vote for fucking president, if you ask me. Absolute superstar of a human being. He's making movies. He's on the Days of Our Lives. He has First Take. He has the Stephen A. Smith podcast. He's doing this. He's doing that. Everything he touches turns to gold. It's all successful. He's a grinder. He's a hustler. He's Stephen A. Smith, right? Shannon Sharpe's the biggest shit out there. They work together now. Undisputed goes on with Shannon Sharpe. It has some success for like 6-7 years because of Shannon Sharpe, not because of Skip Bayless and his routine takes. Tim Tebow, LeBron James, Tom Brady, the Dallas Cowboys, rinse, repeat, do it all over again. 12 months a year, 365 days a year. Let's do it every single time, every single Monday through Friday. You know why? Because we can do it, because there's nobody else to watch, and we've already brainwashed the minds of America that this is what sports television looks like. He had zero substance. He never came with any facts. Mark Cuban called him out for that. He was never aware that the people cared what he had to say. He teamed up with a Hall of Fame athlete that ended up exposing him and his ego that everyone talked about, that ever worked with Skip Bayless, from the Miami Herald to the Dallas Morning News to the Dallas Times Herald to Cold Pizza to First and 10 to First Take with Stephen A. Smith to Undisputed with Shannon Sharpe. Shannon Sharpe and that debacle and how that went down at the very, very end and the nasty ending exposed Stephen A. and ended Stephen A. Smith. All right? The argument where Shannon Sharpe and Stephen A. are having a classic Tom Brady argument, and Shannon Sharpe is doing what he does, and he's trolling Stephen A. Smith, and he's talking about Tom Brady, and at some point it comes to comparing the two, and Shannon Sharpe is like, I'm a Hall of Famer. I retired the greatest tight end of all time, arguably, which is true. He's like, I'm in the same standing. Stephen A. tried to violate, I mean, not Stephen A., Skip Bayless tried to violate Shannon Sharpe as a man in that moment. Put your glasses back on, he said to him. As a man. The self-control that Shannon Sharpe has, which is why he's an NFL Hall of Famer. Discipline, self-control, ability to exercise that at its very extremes to go along with, obviously, his God-given gifts. To not beat the brakes out of Skip Bayless's crusty ass after saying, put your glasses back on, I'll finish what I have to say, is unreal. And that being on national television and the lack of awareness of how much of a narcissistic asshole Skip Bayless looked like doing that, the lack of awareness of knowing that, and him thinking, I'm going to get rid of Shannon Sharpe and do away with him and create another Shannon Sharpe with the list of athletes that he brought in who I hope go and have success in this industry. It's just not going to be with Skip Bayless. When he did that, it ended him. He brought in a list of guys, and none of it worked, and I don't think it didn't work because of them. I don't think it worked because of Skip Bayless. And the day that Skip Bayless's career ended, Marcellus Wiley has a video where he talked about this. The day of the NFL draft, where everybody in the world wants to get sports content, wants to get NFL draft content, watch and consume everything they can leading up to that. I know I do. I know anybody that's listening to this sure as hell does. He had 45,000 viewers of Undisputed that day, right? It was the day of the NFL draft first round, and the Los Angeles Lakers with LeBron James had a playoff game. And nobody in the world with the Fox Sports 1 and the Fox platform with billions of dollars pumped into it. Skip Bayless was making $8 million a year at Fox Sports 1 because they're lazy and they thought that the routine Skip Bayless shit was good enough to build their entire Fox Sports 1 platform with Skip Bayless and Colin Cowherd the way ESPN did it from 2008 to 2012 or whatever it was. They just tried to copy and paste and put it right there. It didn't fucking work. With that platform, they're paying this guy $8 million a year to get 45,000 viewers on a day where he was talking about his bread and butter, the NFL and LeBron James. First Take had a show that day, and they did pretty well. They hit their standard. Right? They had just come off wasting an entire NFL season with Skip Bayless without Shannon Sharpe, where Shannon Sharpe and First Take are smacking their ass every single day on the ratings numbers. Doing good. First Take's what it is. They've done a good job adapting, making the show what it is. Tip of the cap to Stephen A. Smith, being who he is, understanding this Max Kellerman thing. It ain't working. He's got to go, bro. That old show, the world, they're telling us what we need to know. Everybody's tired of this one-on-one debate show with the moderator in between. We need to spice this show up. Let's bring in more athletes. Let's bring in more players. Let's bring in Mad Dog Russo. Let's bring in all these different personalities to argue and challenge Stephen A. First Take has changed and adapted, brother. You did not. What happened with Drake and Kendrick Lamar, right? Not just who won, who lost, not the song, Not Like Us. What was the beginning of it? Why did all of these rappers in the industry team up with Kendrick Lamar? Because they thought Drake hijacked the industry, boxed them out, and was controlling it with the power he had with an Apple deal, like Skip Bayless in a Fox Sports 1 deal or an ESPN deal, making millions of dollars a year They're pouring and investing into you, and you know it. You control who comes onto this show. Jalen Rose goes onto the show and fucking exposes you in 50 seconds because you talked for 3 minutes. And by the way, the context of that argument was Skip Bayless talking about how you don't have to have pro athlete experience to know what you're talking about, which is right. But how all of these GMs in the NFL didn't even play high school sports and went on to win championships. Bill Walsh wasn't a great athlete and won Super Bowls. All of these people he threw in there in the mix that have done great things without having some Hall of Fame athletic career. And Jalen Rose, in 50 seconds, because he had no time left in the segment, picked them apart and basically said, yeah, that's like saying Bill Gates dropped out of college, so if you drop out, you're going to beat Bill Gates. Not everybody falls into the same category, Skip. So Skip, from that point forward, got exposed by Jalen Rose in a lot of ways. He picked him apart, he did his thing, and it was for the thing that ultimately ended up being his demise. The pride comes before the fall. Skip Bayless couldn't accept who he was and couldn't accept that the superstars that he worked with made him the millions and millions and millions of dollars that came into his pockets over those years of those shows and not him. And he couldn't be grateful for just that. He could only be grateful if he thought and knew that the public thought it was all because of him. And that's why they say the pride comes before the fall, brother, in every situation. Some quotes from colleagues. Dan Labertard, I hate what you've done to sports television. He told that to Stephen A. Smith when talking about him and Skip Bayless. He said that you killed German journalism in the eyes of journalists. The writing was on the wall for this. I read you the ratings. The ratings were shitty for a year. Every single clip that you saw put out from Undisputed was cringy and terrible, every way that you look at it. He's 70 years old. Let's look at the political landscape. I'm not very political. This is a sports show. It's never going to be a politics show. But one thing everybody agrees on is the age of Biden. He's too old to serve our country. What people are scared of is that Trump is going to be too old to serve the country if it's him, right? That there should be an age limit on the presidency. Well, there should probably be an age limit on just about everything, on everything. And that age limit is probably 70 years old. It's important to acknowledge that Skip Bayless is a 71-year-old man, right? It's time to pack it up. And Skip, personally, if you can't live your life outside of misery at 71 years old with the millions of dollars you made. You just made $8 million a year over 7 years. Y'all do the math on that from Fox Sports 1. Who knows what the fuck he made at ESPN? Probably millions. You can't take that at 71 years old, go home, retire with Ernestine in your palace, wherever the fuck you live at, and your little dogs, and live your life in happiness. Then you need to address some other shit, brother. You need to address some other shit. That's you. You're a miserable human being if that's the case. And ultimately, no self awareness, insecurity, pride will cave a man and be the despise of anybody. And that was the despise in the end of Skip Bayless. But it was really the end of what sports television was, sports content was the last 10 plus years. I'm happy that we are in a place today where we don't have to regurgitate and listen to whatever Fox Sports 1 and ESPN and major corporate sports media decide to shove down our throats and brainwash us anymore. We can choose our content and think for ourselves the way it always should have been. And then now former athletes and players have more access to have a platform and speak their opinions and make money and develop a career beyond their career more so than they ever had before when they had to depend on Skip Bayless and major networks to reach out and give them an opportunity like he did for Shannon Sharpe 7, 8 years ago. Right? Tip of the cap for doing that. But let's not forget that he also boxed out a lot of people from being able to get their foot in the door because he wanted journalists and people like him to tell you what a good athlete looks like, what a clutch athlete looks like, what a good player looks like. And it went beyond having fun trolling like I do with LeBron James, Tom Brady, and other guys. It went to him actually believing it and believing that he was just as successful and good as LeBron James and these other athletes at what he did, and that it was comparable. And that he could talk to Shannon Sharpe, an NFL Hall of Famer. That's as high as it gets in any profession in the world, including all the other sports professions. There ain't shit touching the NFL Hall of Fame. There's only 300 plus athletes in that bitch. Thousands and thousands and thousands have tried and played from Pop Warner to the NFL. Thousands and thousands and thousands. Only 300 plus have that gold jacket. And Skip Bayless tried to talk to him like and belittle him like a child. Pride comes before the fall. That happened with Skip Bayless. It also happened, and I'm going to end on this, with the women's national basketball team. Turns out Caitlin Clark should have been on the team. WNBA beat the USA. So if they fucking win the gold medal, do they just give it to those girls? And by the way, the WNBA, are they the worst marketers of all time? This is only going to be a few minutes. Are they the worst marketers in the history of marketing sports or anything in the world? First off, they got like 12 teams that play each other like every week, and that is what it is. You only got so much money, so many teams. Whatever. I don't give a shit. But you got by far the most popular player in the league, and it's not your fault that girls are girls and they're hateful and they don't want anybody else to get all the shine that they want, and girls don't like each other, and that's just the reality to girls. And that is what it is. But to box her out of the Olympics was stupid, and we could act like it wasn't, blah, blah, blah. No, it's stupid. She's better than that entire fucking team. She's the best basketball player in the world. Let's stop playing games. And so is Angel Reese and all these other players that got boxed out. They should have been on the team. They're better than those players, and they're way more popular. So now there's 2 weeks without WNBA basketball, and I can promise you nobody's watching the women's national basketball team after they lost to the WNBA All-Star team that's not on the women's national team. You dummies. Erase the league and restart. Y'all aren't good enough at it. Today was the Shonee Jackson Show, episode 7. I love y'all more than you know. Not as much as you think. We went an hour 35 today. I had a lot of shit to say. Please like, subscribe to the podcast. Y'all have a great day, great week. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.